Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. So today I'm going to be doing the 14.2b jungle tier list. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. So I'm going to be a bit more aggressive with these changes. I covered it in the last video where I want to get things in a better position rather than rating things kind of more generically and so highly. I'm going to be a bit more aggressive with their placement, kind of specify why, and cover a lot of the changes. So let's get into it. To begin with, Talia is going to be within my B tier. Talia is a fine option. She's obviously weaker with Luden's Companion compared to Luden's Tempest. Doesn't really like Liandry's as much as the old one, where she had a lot more value. She kind of does want mana within the jungle, especially when she goes to fight as well. That can be quite valuable. Overall, just not performing to the same level as last season, but still a solid B tier pick. Yi is going to be within my S tier, so I'm going to be a lot more aggressive in my S tier. He does fit the bill though at the moment. He's incredibly strong, abuses a lot of the marksman items, really values something like the Kraken Slayer. The Bork, of course, getting better this patch with more health on a lot of targets. Overall, just performing really well at the moment and a very valuable pick. Amumu is going to be within my B tier. He's kind of a low B tier option. Obviously, losing Radiant Virtue definitely did hurt him. People are still not really opting into the Liandry's, where it is a very strong item on him. Abyssal Mask still works very good on him. He just struggles as he doesn't abuse a lot of the other tank items as well as a lot of the other champions. Sunfire's being on the weak side doesn't really help him. I'd really recommend just sitting on Barmies and then looking at something like a Frozen Heart if you want to get more value out of that. But overall, he's a fine option, very simple to play, good tank if you do need it, but there are definitely better options. A better option being Zac at the moment. Zac is incredibly strong, a solid, he's an OP top laner, OP mid laner, very strong support, and a very strong jungler. Within the jungle, he of course really values things like the Liandry's as well, can opt into something like the Barmy Cinder. Doesn't usually go Frozen Heart as much as some of the other champions, as he doesn't really value, he doesn't use the mana, and he values health a lot more. But Spirits is a great item for him. He can go Kainic Raccoon later on into his build if he does want it. The Magic Sunfire's item is also great for him as well, Hollow Radiance. Overall, the hotfix buffs did wonders for him. He's in a very strong spot at the moment, probably the best jungle tank you can play. Udyr is a good top laner, a good jungler, definitely a solid A tier pick. Both AD and tank builds are viable at the moment. You can opt into things like the Triforce, you can opt into things like the Liandry's, both are solid. Yeah, play whichever one you prefer, or whichever one makes sense in the game. Lilia and Brand are just going to be my S plus tier this patch. I'm not going to have a third because these champions are just so overpowered at the moment. Lilia incredibly strong with Liandry, Riftmaker, and Rylai Power Spike. Brand had a thing at the beginning of this patch. They quickly hotfix nerfed him, but even then he is still very much performing quite well. The tick rate on his burn means he now more frequently checks for like Liandry's and Rylai ticks, meaning certain things which happened before, like sometimes you could escape Rylai slow if you had enough tenacity. Doesn't happen anymore. Overall, yeah, Brand, incredibly strong pick. Even with the hotfix nerf, he's still good. And Lilia, just an incredibly strong pick as well. Both of these junglers make for great AP threats. Allow for like an AD mid laner, of course. Hubris being really good at the moment. Definitely opens things up there. Alongside a tank top laner as well. So yeah. Kayn is going to be within my S tier. So this is blue Kayn. I wouldn't really recommend playing red Kayn at the moment. It's definitely struggling a lot more. The itemization just isn't quite there. It wouldn't surprise me if they do end up nerfing blue Kayn and then buffing up red Kayn to kind of even them back out again. Summon area interaction is gone on Kayn. It no longer gives him more orbs. Dark Harvest is the way you want to be going. People still are struggling. A couple of people aren't hopping off. The majority of people have at this point though. But that does decrease his win rate. Even then, it's still very strong. Can abuse items like Profane Hydra. Can abuse items like Hubris. Really values the items like Yomu's. Opportunity also really good on him. Overall, blue Kayn having a field day at the moment. Very strong champion. Definitely worth playing. Alongside that, the other assassin here is Eve. Eve is very good. Very much enjoys things like Lichbane as a rush option. You can go Storm Surge, but the main selling point, of course, is the Lichbane and the Magi's. You can opt into things like a Rabadon second. Of course, you do need to snowball with this champion. Scaling isn't bad, but it becomes a lot harder to pilot the champion later on into the game when there is lockdown, huge bursts, stuff like this. But overall, in an incredibly strong spot at the moment, definitely the best AP assassin of the patch. Graves is going to be within my S tier. So Graves also very solid. He was in my S plus tier as being like as just the best AD jungler. Very strong on invades, can abuse items like Youmu's and Hubris very well. Loves items like Collector. Overall, his DPS is incredibly strong. His ability to skirmish is also really nice. Yeah, solid invades, solid clear, good team fight, good scaling. He's just got everything going for him. I wouldn't say he primarily excels at anything, but is a very good jack of all trades. Teemo is an A tier pick. He is better in low elo for sure compared to high elo. He did get buffed, hotfix buffed back up as he did get over nerfed. Overall, the changes have landed him within about the A tier. Very solid option if you're looking for someone with a very valuable blind tool. Also good clear speed and streams, of course, are both very valuable. Briar is going to be within my S tier. So Briar received a bunch of changes this patch, and she stays really strong. Not the S plus tier like last patch, but then she kind of doesn't fit there when there's two very strong champions. But still a very solid option. Overall, her builds have very much closed and are very close to each other. The Titanic, Hydra, Sky variation, and the Lethality variation are both viable in most spots. You can opt into whichever one you prefer. Of course, you want to go with the lethality option into games with very squishy champions, but the bruiser option can work fine there if you're looking for a bit more durability. Of course, the bruiser option works quite nicely against tanks. Having that cleaver application is very nice. Yeah, lots of things going well for this champion at the moment. Will probably be nerfed this patch, but definitely in a solid spot. Vivern is also going to be in my S tier. This is almost the complete S tier wrapped up, but Ivan is very strong at the moment. He is very unique in being like the only enchanter jungler. Of course, Arden and Moonstone work very nicely on him. You can opt into Star Cooler, I believe it's called. I can never remember the capstone enchanter item, but it is a very solid option once you have a couple of items going. Of course, Redemption still a very solid option as well there, and Daisy is a great thing to have. Very nice summon, works quite well with a lot of comps, and having the knockup is very valuable. Maokai is going to be within my A tier. Yeah, I put him in the A tier. Maokai is a very solid tank option. As I said before, he is very simple to pilot. Can opt into AP builds. The Leandries does work on him, just not as well as it used to, so just be aware of that. I would very much just recommend going tank. Yeah, one of the better, easier champions to play, definitely a solid tank option there. Gragas got buffed this patch. He is in a significantly better spot. They gave him a bit more durability, lowered the cooldown on his ultimate so he can fish for ganks more often. And yeah, the builds are fine. Things like Storm Surge, Lichbane, quite nice on him. I would really recommend just going like Lichbane first though. Rabadon's also quite nice on him. He has decent AP ratios, especially if you're able to get consistent charges off the queue. Yeah, solid A tier pick. Rek'Sai is also going to move with my A tier, so Rek'Sai is performing really well with Youmu's. However, most Rek'Sai players haven't swapped over yet. They are still going with Titanic Hydra. It's nice, obviously, for the Q reset, but Youmu's is very strong on Rek'Sai. Opting into like the old lethality variant of like, yeah, Youmu's, Edge of Night. You can pick up things like a Hubris if you're very much snowballing, but as always, Rek'Sai is very much a 2-item power spiker. You want to be able to close out games within like 20 to 25 minutes. That is where she excels. Later on for games, she still does struggle, just not as much as she used to, but yeah, definitely want to close out games early. Echo is going to be within my A tier. So Echo is an incredibly strong mid laner at the moment. If you want to play Echo mid. But Echo in the jungle is still also a very solid option. Nash's 2 for Lichbane make for 2 great items on him. Yeah, very solid A tier pick. Poppy is also going to be with my A tier. Poppy is very strong at the moment and works very nicely as a counter pick. I wouldn't really recommend blinding Poppy jungle, but if you see something like Lee Sin, lock it in. It's great. Very good denial, very good tank pick. Can opt into things like Cindered Sky. If you're looking for a more bruiser variant of Poppy, it is a viable build. Kha'Zix is also going to move in my A tier. Kha'Zix is a very solid champion at the moment. If you're able to get Youmu's and an early Hubris, this champ can snowball most games. It's not quite an S tier pick. Rengar really does just take that spot for a S tier AD assassin. I'm going to talk about Rengar in a second, but this champ is incredibly strong. In fact, I'll talk about him now. Rengar is the closest thing to the S plus tier at the moment, but you have to pilot the champion well. I will not overstate this enough, but Rengar is incredibly good if piloted well. Getting an early hubris going alongside some lethality options, this champ is unstoppable. Of course, if you're not very good at piloting him and you mess up the combos, then the champ does lose a lot of power. So just be aware of that. But yeah, very solid pick at the moment. Definitely worth playing if you have the hours in him. Viego is going to be over my A tier. Viego is a very solid pick. Just good versatility. Opt into things like the Bork, the Kraken Slayer. He tends to be more of this like hybrid skirmisher. But yeah, very solid pick. Kind of similar to like Belveth, but Belveth is a bit stronger at the moment, so I'd recommend playing Belveth over Viego. Talon is going to be over my B tier. In fact, Talon can go alongside Zed and Kiana. All three of these champions are fine. If you pilot them well, they are very strong. Lethality options definitely being better at the moment does give these champions a lot of power. They would have once been like C, D tier picks. They do clear a bit slower. They're a bit weaker compared to some of the other fighters. But definitely in a solid spot. And yeah, if you do pilot them well, they are very good picks. For sure. Vi is in the A tier. Vi is actually towards the higher end of the A tier. Kind of goes alongside Udyr here, honestly. Just reliability, the main thing here. Her ultimate is a very powerful tool. She does do a decent amount of damage. If you're running something like a Conqueror and Sky variant, lots of power there, lots of damage. And yeah, very nice champion to play at the moment. Definitely a solid A tier pick. In fact, the other A tier picks which I really want to recommend are Nocturne, for his simplicity and for his just for his feel with experimental hex plate. This item feels really nice on him. It gives him good durability, gives him good attack speed, gives him good AD, gives him a bit of movement speed, and overall the stat line combined with how it functions is just really nice for Nocturne. He's not as strong later on into his build. He definitely starts struggling there, which is why he's not as high as old Nocturne was, but still a very solid option. Spikes very nicely off this one item. Xin Zhao is actually the highest pick within the A tier. The problem is I have to separate the S tier and the A tier because the gap is just so big between these champions. Xin is still a very solid pick and like the closest to closing this gap, but for the most part, for his simplicity, he's just not quite there in the damage output and the durability some of these other champions have, or just the unique kind of nature of some of these champions, whether it's like their enchanting ability, their ability to like infinitely stack AD, stuff like this. Lee Sin going to be within my A tier. Lee Sin's a very solid option at the moment. Cinder's Sky working quite nicely on him. I would really recommend learning the champion first, though. He is quite difficult to pilot correctly, and not every game is an inset game. That is something which I've noticed people try to look for too often. Sometimes just a clean game of Lee Sin where you land your Qs, you do what needs to be done, is the best thing you can do on this champion. Jax got nerfed this patch. He finds himself within the A tier. He's a solid option still. Just not quite as powerful as he used to be. Not being able to stack the E damage as high as he used to be is the main thing here. It makes his clear speed a bit slower, makes his team fighting a bit slower, but his split push is better. They gave him his W and his R 50% on hit damage towards towers, which is a nice thing. Allows for a bit more clear speed. Sejuani is going to be within my B tier. I hate Sejuani. I think her reliability on ult is too much at the moment. If you can't land Glacial Prison frequently, it really hurts this champion. She's too reliant on synergies. If you're not a melee champion, then her E becomes a lot less valuable. Overall, yeah, it's just reliance on certain things within a kit. Of course, when Sejuani is a very strong champion, it can feel really oppressive to play against. She has a lot of CC tools, but for the moment, she's just not there. So I would recommend playing other tanks over Sejuani, but she's not the worst thing in the world. You can, if you're good at piloting her, then there is still definitely value there. Mordekaiser, very strong champion at the moment. If you want to play Mordekaiser anywhere, play him in the top lane. He's really good there. Honestly, mid lane Mordekaiser isn't even that bad. Like, definitely also consider it there. Jungle Mordekaiser, of course, doesn't clear as fast as a lot of the other champions, but has a lot of power and 1v1 potential. His build is really strong at the moment. There's value there for this champion, definitely. He's a pilot as well. Yeah, solid A tier pick. Nidalee is going to be within my B tier. If you pilot Nidalee well, then she is like an S tier option, but of course most people can't, so she falls more towards the B tier. Lich Bane is definitely the way to go as a first option of this champion. Like Eve, you want to get an early Magi, stack that up, so you can continue to snowball throughout the game. Rumble. Honestly, I thought Rumble would be a bit of a dark horse this patch, or B patch, when they did the hotfix changes. Giving a champion free base AD when they are already a relatively decent jungler can be quite scary because it does amplify their clear speed. They are autoing a lot more within the jungle. Alongside this, they did buff the AP ratio on the E, but his win rate just isn't really there. It's still not a bad option for sure. The Q damage going down and the E shred going down definitely did hurt him, but overall stay solid B tier pick. If you can pilot the champion well and you close out games, then yeah, the champion's good, but if you can't, then it does definitely fall off. Gwen, really solid A tier pick. They ended up buffing Gwen back up this patch, and she finds herself as a solid A tier pick. Elise is going to be with my B tier. Elise just isn't doing too hot at the moment. She is one of the weaker AP assassins within the jungle. The itemization is not really there, but Lichbane kind of gives her a bit of an angle in terms of her builds. But yeah, Storm Surge, probably too weak now, if anything. I think they over-nerfed Storm Surge because, I mean, obviously it's a very big frustration point. When the item looks like it's doing as much damage as it is, it can be very scary. But yeah, I think they've over-swung now, which has hurt a lot of AP Assassins. Talking about AP Assassins, Diana definitely hurt by this the most. Diana's really struggling at the moment, finds herself within the C tier. Warwick. So Warwick is an interesting one. Warwick is in my A tier, but Warwick is very strong with the Titanic Hydra Bork build at the moment. There is a lot of power there. If you're able to snowball on this champion, then it does a huge amount of damage. It's relatively durable, but more of a low elo pick, definitely. The champion does start falling off once you hit like around Diamond, but still a decent pick. Definitely a solid A tier option. Shaco is within my B tier. They are buffing Shaco next patch, we know that much. He's not doing too great on either build at the moment, but AP is definitely the way you want to go. Of course, if you can snowball with AD, picking up things like a Yomu's and a Hubris can be very valuable. He does value items like the Voltaic Cycler Sword. That can work nicely on him. Of course, the Slow can work well on that. There are build variations, just not doing amazingly compared to a lot of the other champions. Moving on, so Nunu is going to be within my A tier. Nunu is a solid tank pick. He is also a solid AP pick. They buffed AP Nunu's ratios towards the end of the last season, and it's put both builds in a very solid spot. Leandri's Rush seems to be optimal at the moment, has been since the beginning of the season, but there are tank variations you can go. Overall, yeah, Champ's in a solid spot at the moment. Karthus is going to be with my B tier, so they buffed Karthus back up. He's just not quite there within his power. Definitely got a lot more powerful within the bot lane though. The Q damage went up and the W shred also went up. There was a bug at the beginning of the season, but that got fixed pretty quickly. But yeah, finds himself within the B tier at the moment. Trundle is going to be in my A tier. So Trundle is a very solid pick. Very simple to play. One of the simplest champions to play actually in the game. Rammus as well, honestly. They can both go next to each other as one answers the other. But yeah, Rammus and Trundle, very easy champions to play. Rammus is great as a counter pick. Trundle is also great as a counter pick, but can be a bit more blindable. Really values things like Tiamat. Just has very nice builds. Rammus isn't as strong as a blind pick, as he does lose to things like Brandon and Lilia. You have to be banning one of these champions, but into a lot of the AD Hubris users, he is very solid. So yeah, both find themselves within the A tier. Two of the higher A tier picks. Honestly, this 6 here is the closest towards the S tier, and then there's a bit of a gap, and then the rest of the A tier. Honestly, Sidus and Twitch can go in the D tier. Both of these champs are pretty terrible at the moment. Neither of them can clear very well. Honestly, Twitch can go in a tier of his own. Twitch jungle just doesn't really work these days. Most people understand the functionality of the pick. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't clear very well. The builds are fine, but when you can't really get income as this pick, unless you are able to get those like early kills, yeah, it's too gimmicky and it just doesn't really function. Sidus, on the other hand, used to be a good jungler last season, but lost a lot of power this season. Just can't clear as well. Obviously, his main thing was his damage. They did nerf that. On the last patch of the season, his W damage went down by a decent amount. That was his main clear tool. And overall, he just finds himself in the D tier. Definitely the weakest jungler. Compared to Twitch, who I wouldn't even really call a jungler these days. Kindred finds herself within the A tier. So Kindred, not doing too bad at the moment. Definitely values things like Bork and Kraken Slayer. Doesn't seem to be performing as well with the Triforce, but is still a build variant there. Pantheon, going to be within my C tier. Honestly, I'm going to quickly go through my C tier. So Pantheon, not doing too great. Yeah, okay. So Pantheon's damage is fine. He does a solid amount of damage and his clear speed is good, but his builds just aren't as good as last season. He doesn't value the current Eclipse as much as he valued old Eclipse. But yeah, the main thing, of course, is his clear speed isn't bad. He does have really strong ganks with the point-and-click CC, but he doesn't scale very well, and the builds just aren't quite there. Shyvana is pretty bad at the moment. For how simplistic the champion is, the win rate is bad. Both build variations of AP and AD tank aren't doing too great. If anything, the Titanic Hydra build seems to be the best way to play her, running things like Titanic Hydra, Iceborne, and then into like a tanky variant. You should be fine with that, but for the most part, I'd recommend sticking to different champions. There are a lot of better tank options, there are lots of better AP options, so she's not really worth playing. Skarner, I mean, the champion's obviously being changed not too long from now, but for the most part, Trinity Force is the way you're going to go. Even then, the champion underperforms, just not really there. Mundo, also going to be my C tier. They keep trying, well, I say trying. They make the feeblest attempts to make Mundo jungle viable and then give up. This champion just doesn't, like, his clear speed's fine, but his overall, it takes too long for him to really scale. He does lose to just a lot of the meta picks at the moment, but there has been a Mundo jungle and competitive, which is definitely interesting to see. Would I really recommend it within solo queue? No. If anything, just play Mundo top. It's very solid as an answer to a lot of things, and tends to be pretty nice to play. Wukong is going to be within my C tier. So Wukong, not too long ago, was obviously considered the big thing within the jungle. He had a bunch of changes which really helped him. But over the course of last season, they nerfed him down continuously, and now he finds himself as not really a great top laner or jungler. So yeah, more of a C tier pick. Moving on, so Fiddlesticks is going to be within the B tier. He is a solid option at the moment. The builds aren't as strong as last season, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they do buff him up. They do like to keep Fiddle as like a relatively high win rate jungler. They do see him as being a bit inoffensive, but yeah, for the moment, he's in the B tier. Morgana is also going to move in the B tier. Her clear speed's fine. Her build is also fine, like the Liandry, the Rylai. These are solid options on her, just not quite doing as well as a lot of the other picks. Jarvan, actually struggling quite a bit compared to what he used to be. He did get nerfed, obviously, the Q damage went down, the passive damage went down a bit as well. He does work fine with like Cinder Sky. I know some people do like Titanic Hydra on Jarvan as well. But for the most part, if you want to play something which is simple and a bit more reliability, something like a Xin Zhao definitely works a lot better. Scales a bit better, does a bit more damage, so that is a strong option. Rel is definitely more of a competitive pick. Not really that many, well, not many people really play her within solo queue. But she is a solid tank option, definitely. If you're looking for a flex pick, she's also got value in that. But for the most part, I'd recommend other tanks, but she's still a solid option. Hecarim, not finding his footing really that much in this season, but of course things like Spear of Shojin, Manamune, Triforce tend to be his preferred items. Eclipse can work quite nicely on him in certain situations. You don't really see tank Hecarim these days. He's more focused towards his AD ratios, but not quite aggressive enough to really like want to go things like the lethality variant. But yeah, he's a solid option if you're a one trick. Of course, Dantes does play him as like his one trick, which is always interesting to see. But yeah, the pick is fine. Definitely got builds there. I'd recommend really experimenting, seeing what kind of groove you find yourself. But there are better options, so he finds himself within the B tier. Belveth is going to be within my S tier. She is doing really well at the moment. Really values things like Kraken Slayer, Bork. Terminus is quite a nice item on her. Stridebreaker is also quite a nice item on her. Yeah, just got decent builds. The main kind of deceptive thing, obviously, with Belveth, but most people know at this point, is she's an early game champion. You do start struggling later on into your build. The items just aren't as good, and she tends to find it a bit harder with her builds primarily focusing around damage outputs rather than durability, so she can be quite squishy. But overall, still a very solid pick. Honestly, more of an elite skewed pick, if anything. But yeah. not bad. And Volibear going to be within my C tier, struggling as a jungler, and struggling struggling as both a jungler and a top laner at the moment. The build's also just not really there for him. The Iceborne is fine. Dead Bands is also a fine option on him. The AP build isn't performing quite as well. That would be like the Nash's, the Riftmaker variant. I would really just recommend sticking to tank. Of course, you can go things like Titanic Hydra if you're looking for a bit more clear speed. But yeah, Titanic Hydra, Iceborne, Frozen Heart, Sterix maybe, Spirits if you're looking for a bit more durability. He's just a weaker tank at the moment. There are better options, but I imagine he'll get buffed fairly soon. So yeah, should be not bad then. Overall, those are my thoughts on the jungle. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.